Principal, Vice Principal, Dean Academics, teachers, and my dear friends, a very warm good day to all present here. Every day is a good day. There's something to learn, care, and celebrate. Today, 18th December 2021, our college, Federal Institute of Science and Technology, begins the onset of a new cell to be inaugurated for the very first time in the history of Fisat. It's none other than the Gender Equity Cell. It aims to work specially to provide equality for both men and women, male and female, at the entry level at all the entry levels in our organization. A day without prayer is a day without blessing, and a life without prayer is a life without power. So I invite Niranjana for the prayer.
Namami Janani Shaktimayi Namami Janani Shantimayi Namami Janani Shaktimayi Namami Janani Ashadamayi Namami Janani Shaktimayi அறிவின் பொருளாய் அழிவின் கனிவாய் அடியனிலெங்கும் துணையேகோ அடியனிலெங்கும் துணையேகோ நமாமி ஜனனி சக்திமயி Namami Janani Shantimayi Namami Janani Shaktimayi.
Thank you, Niranjana. Starting with our grand inaugural function, I'd like to invite Dr. Reshmi R., Special Grade Assistant Professor of CS Department. She is also the joint convener of Gender Equity Cell. I invite you, ma'am, for the welcome speech. Please, ma'am.
Rashmi, I think you're on mute. We're not able to hear you.
Sorry, okay. Thank you, Rose. A very good morning to one and all. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. So, a very good morning to one and all. Today, we all, men and women, play an equal role in all units of our social life, be it our homes, educational institutions, or workplaces. Both men and women have started taking on equal roles with equal responsibilities and obligations. However, the need of the hour is to provide fair and equal opportunities for women alongside their male counterparts. The Gender Equity Cell at Fisat envisages to facilitate and ensure an egalitarian environment in our institution, where men and women are accorded equitable treatment and opportunities in their formal education without encountering prejudice, gender bias, hostility, or sexual harassment. Today, it's a moment of extreme pleasure for me to welcome the guests who are present here to attend this webinar. I welcome our Honorable Chairman, Mr. Shimit PM, who, with his dynamism and progressive thoughts, has been a front runner in shaping futuristic and ambitious growth plans of Fisat. Sir, I welcome you to this meeting. I heartily welcome our eminent chief guest, Dr. M.V. SHOBHANA WARRIER, Associate Professor, Department of History, Kamala Nehru College, University of Delhi, who is a pioneer in the domain of women empowerment and her rights. Dr. SHOBHANA WARRIER brings to us her immense experience and research in this arena. I welcome you, Madam, to this meeting. I would also like to welcome our principal, Dr. Manoj George, who has been providing leadership to the overall development at Fisat. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
I welcome our vice principal, Dr. C. Sheila, who has been a central pillar in shaping the academics and administration at Fisat. I welcome you, Madam.
Dr. Reshmi.
Our Dean Academics, Dr. Mini Pia, who has envisioned the commencement of this gender equity cell, besides nurturing the academic activities at Fisat. I welcome you, Madam.
Thank you, Reshmi.
I welcome the team members of the Gender Equity Cell and Internal Compliance Cell who have been immensely supporting and executing all the activities of these cells. I also take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to all the HODs, faculty members, non-teaching staff members, and our dear students to this meeting. A gender equal society would be one where the word gender does not exist and where everyone can be themselves. I'm sure that you all will be able to enrich your mind with knowledge through this webinar. I welcome you all once again to this webinar and hope you all will have a great time ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful words.
Thank you, Rose.
Being a good leader is not about having power over others, but also about instilling power in them. Dr. Manoj George, the principal of Fisat, has completed his doctorate degree and MTech from CUSAT, and he is professionally and highly experienced teacher for the past 24 years. I welcome you, sir, for the presidential address. Please, sir.
Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Honorable Chairman of the Federal Institute of Science and Technology, Sri Shimit PR, invited renowned guest of honor, Dr. M.V. SHOBHANA WARRIER, Associate Professor, Department of History, Kamala Nehru College, University of Delhi, Vice Principal, Dr. Sheila, Dean Academics, Dr. Mini, beloved head of the departments, dear faculty colleagues, non-teaching staffs, joint conveners of Gender Equality Cell of Fisat, Dr. Reshmi R, Mr. Basika Jimon, all members of the Gender Equity Cell, and my dear students. A warm good morning to you, everyone assembled here. The effort to make our institution a strong kernel of gender sensitization. We are founding Gender Equality Cell and Internal Compliance Committee association with Iqac Fisat. We shall gladly work united together for the initiative by recalling the phrase of famous anti-apartheid revolutionary, political leader and philanthropist who served as the first president of the South Africa, legendary Dr. Nelson Mandela. Freedom cannot be achieved unless women have been emancipated from all kinds of oppression. Gender equality does not imply that women and men will become equal, but rather that women and men's rights, duties, opportunities will not be contingent and on whether they are born male or female. Gender equality refers to the equal treatment of men and women based on their individual needs. This could involve equal treatment or differential treatment that is deemed equivalent in terms of rights, benefits, obligations, and opportunity. In the 21st century, men and women must enjoy the same facilities and privileges irrespective of their gender. Men and women are frequently treated unequally in distant locations. A society that does not treat men and women equally will never be able to prosper economically. Steps to raise gender awareness is one method to help balance out of discrimination between men and women. That is why our distinguished institution, they are establishing an equity cell. Fisat is committed to tackling the difficulties encountered by women and men, as well as achieving gender equality. An organization striving towards brighter future for all individuals. I extended my affable wishes and encouragement to the cell for the flawless operation. Along the way, remember the words: men of quality respect women's equality. Let us work together to make our dream a reality by moving forward with resolve. Thank you all. Remy.
Thank you, sir. Next in line, I'd like to invite our new esteemed chairman, governing body of Fisat, Mr. Shimit PR. He is the secretary of FBO AES and also the general secretary of Federal Bank Officers Association. I welcome you, sir, for the inauguration and the inaugural address of this auspicious occasion. Please, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Hello.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Audible, sir.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hello. Am I audible?
I can.
Yes, sir.
I think some network problem is here. Anyway, I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Thank you. So, good morning to all. Our chief guest, Dr. SHOBHANA WARRIER, Associate Professor, Department of History, KAMALA NEHRU College, University of Delhi. Our Principal, Dr. Manoj Jor. Our Vice Principal, Dr. Sheila. Our Dean Academic, Dr. Mini PR. Joint Conveners of Gender Equity Cell, Dr. Resmi R. And Mr. Basil K. G. Other faculty members, non-teaching staff, and my dear students. I would like to mention 2 points that hit headlines in this week. One is uniformity in the marriageable age of men and women. that our union government approved the marriage age for women as 21. That bill is going to place in the parliament for approval. That is a national level news. And another one is the state level, that is the gender neutral uniform implemented by 2 schools in Kerala. That unisex uniform is introduced for +1 students in one of the government high school in Kozhikode. I am not going for the detailed discussions or political things behind it. I think today's we can by opening this cell, we can coordinate that incidents with our inauguration of his gender equity cell. We have already one woman cell that is functioning for empowerment of women. And I hope by working together, these 2 cells, gender equity cell and women cell, we can achieve fairness of treatment for men and women in our college. I am very happy that we got such an eminent personality from Delhi University who can deliver or clear or whatever doubts we have about this gender equality and everything. I officially inaugurate the gender equity cell today. Thank you very much. Let us work together to achieve the, as I mentioned, the fairness of treatment for men and women according to their needs. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Those were the words of a refined man with a refined taste. Thirdly, we have with us 2 main dignitaries, Dr. C. Sheila, Vice Principal, who is an active member of Kerala Mathematical Association, and now she serves as the Regional Secretary of the Association. She is also a life member of Indian Society for Technical Education, ISTE. Next in line is Dr. Mini PR, Dean Academics of Fisat. She has received her BE degree in EC from Government College of Technology, Coimbatore, and MTech in Digital System and Communication Engineering from NIT Calicut. She is also an active lifetime member of ISTE. I would like to welcome our Vice Principal and Dean of Academics for the felicitation. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, Rose. I have some net issue, so I could not open my video. Okay, sorry.
Okay. It's okay, ma'am.
Am I audible to you?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Our Honorable Chairman, Sri Shimit PR, our Chief Guest of the Day, Dr. SHOBHANA WARRIER, our Principal, Dr. Manoj, our Dean, Dr. Mini, coordinators of this program, Dr. Rashmi and Mr. Basil, and our student coordinators, our staff members, and my dear students. I deem it a great honor to attend this nice program, the inauguration of Gender Equity Cell. As we all are aware that education is not just to impart knowledge. Education deals with promotion of habits of human beings. If so, we need education seriously to focus on promoting the equal participation of women and men, giving equality in learning process, educational outcomes, and all social aspects. Yes, gender equity is achieved when women and men enjoy the same rights and opportunities across all sectors of society. We are very fortunate to have, with the supportive management, FBOA ES, our chairman, Sri Shimit PR is the central guiding force of all activities here. Here, we are providing very good, harmonious atmosphere at the Institute to enable women to pursue their work with dignity and reassurance. Today, we have inaugurated the Gender Equity Cell. We are very fortunate to have with Dr. SHOBHANA WARRIER. Madam, we are so grateful to you, ma'am. And I wish all success for all the future endeavors of the Gender Equity Cell program. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful words. Next, we have our guest of honor, Dr. M.V. Shobhana, the resource person of the day. Before which, I would request our Dean of Academics to speak a few words. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, Rose. Respected Chairman Shimit sir, Principal Dr. Manoj George, Vice Principal Dr. C. Sheila, esteemed guest of honor Dr. SHOBHANA WARRIER, Ms. Dr. Reshmi and Mr. Basil Jimon, who are the joint conveners of the Gender Equity Cell of Fisat, Dr. Deepa Mary Matthews, who's the convener of the ICC cell, and all my faculty colleagues and students. In fact, it's a very happy moment for me that we have got this Gender Equity Cell functioning in Fisat. And also we have got the best resource person to give the first talk on gender sensitization to us. I'm sure that over the years or in the coming years, we'll have many more programs based on gender sensitization, and together Fisat will contribute to making this world a better place for all humanity, irrespective of whichever gender we belong to. And I wish this program and all the activities of the Gender Equity Cell all success and best wishes. I hope you all have a good day and a good time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your energetic words. So here we have with us our guest of honor, Dr. M.V. Shobhana, the resource person of the day. She is an associate professor at the Department of History at KAMALA NEHRU College, University of Delhi. She has published articles in the Indian and foreign journals and have presented papers at national and international conferences. Dr. WARRIER has served as the external member of the Internal Complaint Committee, which deals with complaints of sexual harassment at the workplace of several institutions. She has obtained her master's and doctoral degree from Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. The topic of today's talk is Gender Sensitization Training, POSHA and Our Rights, where POSHA stands for Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. So without any much further delays, I would like to welcome you, ma'am, for the session. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, Rose, and thanks to the team from the college and to the management of the institute, the principal and the dean for having given me this opportunity to interact with students, not in Delhi, but from faraway Kerala, which is my land. And that gives me immense pleasure because the world today has been kind of really connected now post-COVID, and it's possible for us to speak to people anywhere and everywhere, making the world really a small place. And while the world is a small place, there are lots of very many things that we can have dialogues over, discussions over, formally and informally. First of all, let me also kind of place the context of this discussion, the making of this act, before I go on to talking about the details of the act, right? And when I say details of the act, I want to place the context of the act. All of us think that a whole lot of things that are happening in contemporary India originate in our today's. As a historian, I would like to bring it to everyone's notice and to students particularly, because history as a discipline seems to be a discipline that just kind of talks about the freedom movement, talks about dates in history as an important way of understanding history. Moving beyond that sense of history, let me just make a couple of points. At the same time as when British women were asking for suffrage rights in England during the First World War, in India too, we see the setting up of Women's India Association. The setting up of Women's India Association, the tall leaders coming out of the women's mobilization in the anti-colonial movement, as also in multiple other kinds of social movements, in fact, centered the women's question in the subcontinent. And I'm using the word subcontinent because, the country that we became India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh in its history. But I'm talking about the period prior to the making of this, the division of the countries. And it was the B.N. Rao committee, which in fact took up the question of right to suffrage, right to making laws in terms of women's right to property, that set in roll the motion of what then became the Hindu code in the immediately post-independent India's period. And finally, as we know, the debate about the Uniform Civil Code. And as I talk, the question of the opening up of the rights of women in this country is being debated, contested, legislated upon. Okay? And many of these things that we see as happening today also are connected to the post-independent India's questions of women's movement. And here, one very important milestone that I would like you to keep in mind is the Towards Equality report that was made in the that result. I mean, this part of the UN decade, the terrible conditions of Indian women and maternal mortality, malnutrition, lack of rights in terms of whether it's property, whether it is, we do know that the question of marital rape is also something that is being debated as we are speaking right now. Okay, and out of this Towards Women's Equality report came up this new women's movement that, again, like in the rest of the world, is talking about rights of women as guaranteed in the Constitution. Okay, the Constitution and its promises is the context of, in fact, how in the 1980s and 1990s, the women's movement, and when I say the women's movement, I'm talking about women's movement where the participation of different political parties, NGOs, and women theorists played a significant role. And there's, of course, the setting up of the Women's Studies Center, CWDS, under the directorship of, Veena Mazumdar, a very, very tall, important mind in terms of thinking and working out what is necessary for women's integration and women's experience of equality in a country such as ours. So everything that we're seeing today came from these three different strains of contribution in the 20th century. And the 21st century, in some senses, is reaping the benefits of that discourse, of those debates that took place among political parties, in terms of writing and theoretical works, and also in terms of active political movements in which women were importantly participating. Right? All of us know about the Chipko movement, and we know about the tall men leaders, but the Chipko movement and hugging the trees is something that women were very closely connected with. All of us know that Jyotiba Phule was very important in working for the depressed classes in the 19th century. But we do now we know of a Savitribai Phule and her important role in terms of taking up the question of women's education, right? So the role of women in terms of shaping the history of this country, just as role of other subaltern sections, is quite much overlooked, and that is being written about. And that's a field where I think people like me began to look at women and work. And interestingly, today we are talking about the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act guidelines that came out as a Gazette notification on April 23rd, 2013, right? I mean, which began to define what are the penal offences on the basis of which women can file a case of sexual harassment, right? But much before this, I'd like to kind of also make a point here that, I'm calling this the prevention of sexual harassment at the workplace. I'm giving you these slides, not because I want to kind of read from my slides, but I want you to kind of understand some of the main points of this law so that you can learn to work with it, understand it, and also understand how each one of us has to behave, right? I mean, our public behavior and our new moral codes that are definitely part. So it's called prevention of sexual harassment at the workplace. Can you see what I'm presenting? Yes?
No, madam.
Now can you see?
Was seen earlier, but now we
Yeah,
can't see.
now
I don't know what happened. 1 second. Is that, can you now see it?
Yeah, now we can see.
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
So, much before this act came into being, there was something called the Vishaka guidelines. The Vishaka guidelines came up in 1997. The context of the making of the Vishaka guidelines was the case of the Bhavri Devi episode. These were women who were working in the villages, and they were basically midwives, workers. And then the women's organization in Rajasthan took this up, and that became the context for the first set of guidelines on how to address the question of sexual harassment. Okay, that became part of popular perception. And today, with virtual information around us, we know that with the Me Too campaign, the calling out of people who are sexual harassers, particularly the generation of students that I'm right now talking to, that is how you got introduced to this question of sexual harassment. Okay, but much before that, I'd like to make the point that, as far back as 1920, that is during the non-cooperation movement in the Madura mills, I have an evidence of how the women workers sat on strike for a good 60 days because the mestri, the jobber guy, the guy who was a supervisor who supervised their task, was accused of using lewd language, remarks, bad language, tari vidikiya, right? And also of touching them, bad touch, good touch, that we teach children when they're very young. Very important to teach them this distinction between bad touch and good touch. So these women workers went on strike for 50 days. And this is the point when the Madura Labor Union was coming into being. This is the time when the early independence movement was coming into being. And that's the context where we have a very powerful strike of women in the Madura mills, right? So you see the connection between nationalism, unionization, and the women's issues. Okay, so when we say that we are making these laws for women, we are protecting women. My confession is that women do not really kind of need protection. You need to see how women understood problems at the workplace, took it up, but however did not have outlets in earlier times where the experience of equality as to be expected in the workplace did not come to them easily. Not only did it not come to them equally, we do know that it's only recently that when we travel in public transportation, we can look at a guy and say, "Why are you looking at me like that? Don't you have something else to see? I'm not your eye candy." Okay. Now that's something that a woman can say today. And if the man continues to look, you can in fact take the bus to the police station, right? But I would say that you should not be just one woman in the bus. You must be at least a bunch of 5, 6 women. Now I'm not saying that, for every gaze that you face while you are part of the public transport experience, you should make it a case. But the point that I'm trying to say here is that this Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act, that was passed in 2013, even classifies bad gaze as not acceptable to the woman. And and that is also offensive to the woman, right? Be that as it may be, we do know that while these guidelines and then of course the making of the act in the form of the Act of 2013, that's my next slide. As I just told you, April 23rd, 2013, the Ministry of Law and Justice, right? The act, it's called, it's sexual harassment. It's called. I mean, you can see the act. If you can just check it. It's a Gazette notification, and you see three components in it: prevention, prohibition, and redressal. Okay. Prevention, prohibition, and redressal. These three important words are very meaningful and are very meaningful, again, on two counts. One, there is an act that is a deterrent, but there is also a set of guidelines that institutions can follow, whereby you can, in fact, preempt the possibility of a case being slapped by a woman on a man in an institution. And that is why that is why the functioning of this, the prevention of this act can be the prevention of sexual harassment is a very important part of the functioning of this act. Okay, so it gives you the opportunity for redressal. But what are the mechanisms that you can adopt to prevent sexual harassment? And in that, campaigning on the lines of what is sexual harassment in a regular way becomes a very important part of preventing sexual harassment, right? For example, a police constable, I've seen it many times, sometimes during the festivals when we are kind of seeing boys come to the campus, right? I mean, I've taught in many colleges, I've studied in many institutions, right? So the moment you are part of proctorial duty and suppose a girl says, sir, this boy is not looking at me nicely, I have problems with him, I will take the girl's word as what it is until the boy is able to disprove that that is not what it is. Okay. Now, this is something that is there in the act, but what is it that I have to actually communicate by which this gaze does not become part of institutions and people's behavior is by kind of giving them in a very short caption in your institution. You must have, posters, at least in prominent places where, for example, when you travel on a train, do not pull the chain. Right, you will face the consequences of 500 rupees or 5,000 rupees and whatever else. Or when you travel on a plane, similar, you have the emergency exit, but it's only to be used for emergency. Okay, so you have these kinds of guidelines in places. Similarly, on the question of prevention of sexual harassment, this act clearly gives you the possibility of prevention, right, by going through a set of things. One is, of course, having regular campaigns, which is what we are doing today is all about. The second is to have in public locations, in institutions, posters that explain this act in a very simple way. Okay, what is the do's and the don'ts, right? The do's and the don'ts. In every institution, we have anti-ragging. Similarly, POSHA also demands a certain set of, practices that are expected. So if you read the notification, you will see it is well given. Now, what is the definition of sexual harassment on the basis of this act, right? You can see. Can everybody see what is there? When somebody says, what did I do? I just looked at a beautiful girl. Is that also a crime? Right? That's an answer that somebody can always give. But just looking in a way where the other person feels uncomfortable is also an act of offense, right? But at the same time, I'd also like to add here that all looks are not offensive. But women can well understand what is an offensive case. So you have to communicate that that offensive gaze is not acceptable, right? That is one. Any kind of physical contact or advances. You know, when you travel in buses, there are guys who kind of stick to you from the back. Okay, so when we were young people, in the city of Delhi, which has toxic masculinity. I'm sorry to say, I've lived in this city for a large part of my life. But this toxic masculinity is something that we as young women began to take on, where, from college specials, we targeted, we registered FIRs in police stations, etc., etc. So this is the pioneering of how taking on sexual harassment by this generation in the 1980s and 90s, in fact, changed the scenario where, of course, if you are just one woman, it's not, acceptable. So you can see that this, sexual harassment defines physical contact and advances. Demand for sexual favors. Okay, when you say demand for sexual favors, I was doing a talk in a college where the same act was being discussed, and there were students and teachers there. And what is the request for sexual favors? Now, if a teacher asks a student out for coffee beyond college hours, that's not acceptable, right? Because the teacher is in a position of power vis-a-vis the student. So, professional practice demands of a superior to be careful of not treading the boundaries of that relationship. Okay, so any kind of sexual favors, whether you kind of, whether it's, it's not happening anymore, but the question of, sexual favors in lieu of, a student being, what is this? A student being asked for, sexual favors in return for being taken care of is also part of this act. Thirdly, any kind of sexually colored remarks, right? If somebody makes a comment on somebody's breasts or somebody's buttocks, this is offensive. It is offensive, and it can create a huge lot of personal anxiety to somebody. And this is also covered under the act. And any kind of verbal and non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. Okay, so the act is very, very clear in terms of everything that it covers. Everything that it covers, and it promises to provide for a situation where where people can actually seek redressal under various counts. And if you really look at it carefully, all these 5 parts that have been classified as part of sexual harassment, right? If people are careful in terms of their everyday behavior, by and large, it makes for a very fine, conducive environment for men and women to interact, learn, and grow, and amicably coexist. Okay, but however, that's not something that we see is easily. What's happening? Some message came to me and I pressed it and it just went. It's just kind of got blocked, my presentation.
Ma'am, please stop the sharing and reshare it again.
That's also kind of totally okay. Yeah. So I got some Akhil's message and I kind of accepted it thinking that this annotation was coming from somewhere. And I don't really, I trust everybody, everything that comes in a presentation as something that's enabling. Sometimes it's also disabling. We have to also be wary of it. There are pranks everywhere. Yes, so every institution has to have an ICC cell, right? An internal complaints committee cell. That's mandatory. And even as recently as a couple of years back, I got to know that some places are still setting it up. People are, and in private sector, people believe that we are not governed by it. No, private, public, government, Supreme Court, every place, this ICC is mandatory, right? It's mandatory because in every place, human behavior can be aberrant. And this law basically creates the ground for an environment that is conducive for men and women to work together and at the same time not create a situation of terror and fear where women feel vulnerable. And then a lot of women, in fact, even give up their jobs because of the fear of the superior on account of sexual harassment. They change jobs, right? Suddenly somebody resigns a job and then the office is wondering what happened. The only person who really understands it is the oppressor, but he, of course, keeps quiet. Okay. Similarly, students change colleges. They stop going to college, and then suddenly, the person is going off abroad. The person has got into depression. One never gets to know what has happened, right? So you can kind of avert all this if the ICC in every institution, and what is the ICC? It's a committee for 3 years. 50% of the people in that are women, and the person who heads it is a senior woman. And if there is no senior woman in the institution, then somebody from the institution that is a sister institution connected to that. Here we are talking about companies or public sector offices or government institutions. They then kind of become the chairperson and presiding officer of that committee. 50% of the committee has to be women. And there is a third-party representation. And this third-party representation primarily comes from women who are either women who are connected to women's issues, who have been activists, who have been academics, who have been part of NGOs, who have a certain history of interest in women's issues. Even the members of the committee should have shown a great deal of interest on women's issues. That is the criteria for anybody to come on board the committee. It is not a committee where it is just a function of designation decided by the institution. Only those people who are sensitive to women's concerns, who are interested in making things better for women in terms of the workplace, in terms of the university, the college, are invited on the board of the committee, right? And this committee works for 3 years. And what is the committee's task? One is, of course, if there's an internal, if there's a complaint, take up the complaint and work towards an inquiry and move towards a decision. But most importantly, the committee's task is also to make the community know the act, right, in a simplified form. And that's the campaigning, the part of running orientation programs, workshops, etc. Okay, so this is and then above the ICC, you have the local complaints committee. Now people say, okay, in my institution, there is no ICC, but wherever you live, okay, so when you go from home to college, there have been cases where I've been told that the sexual harassment did not happen in college. It happened outside of college, and therefore it is outside the terms and references of our institutions, functioning. No. If a student complains or if a teacher complains that she is facing domestic violence or sexual violence in the home, or while she's making a trip from home to the institution, that too comes under this act. and it makes it necessary for institutions to take it up. Now, I'm not saying that all these, these everything should become cases. But once you kind of take up this campaign and proliferate this, information, disseminate this information, you will see that it will become a deterrent, right? It's like the nuclear bomb. Everybody keeps the nuclear bomb. Nobody is going to use the nuclear bomb. But the very fact that you have such a powerful set of guidelines in this Gazette notification of 2013 should act as strong enough to prevent people from crossing the Lakshman Rekha, from crossing the boundaries of what should be the everyday behavior and the normative patterns, as it were, right? So the ICC, therefore, goes about its task as follows. One is, it is, the presiding officer, the member, the chairperson has to assist the woman in registering the complaint. Okay. In many places, I'm told, oh, we don't have any problems. There are no complaints. Obviously, there will be no complaints. Why? Because for a woman to take that step of registering a complaint is actually a very difficult step to take. It's a difficult step because she doesn't know what her family will say. She doesn't know how secure she will be. She doesn't know what the consequences of that will be for her in an institution. So she will be making that complaint only when she has absolutely no other way out. Okay. So therefore, what is the important task of the ICC in an institution? To become the enabler, right? So when we have little children in our schools, they come to the preschool, we hold them by the hand and we make them, write the first letters, right? Make the first apples or oranges or whatever. Okay, so in the same way, for the ICC, it's important that the ICC becomes the hand-holding mechanism for preventing sexual harassment, if possible. Okay, and how will that happen? To have a little box, right? Or to have a little an email now, because email has now become the easiest site for us to collect information about each other and disseminate information on things. So somebody can easily make a complaint, or a WhatsApp message, or an emergency cell phone number, right? These are all mechanisms which then kind of becomes the basis of preventing any kind of crisis, right? Much before the complaint gets to be registered, much before somebody's violence actually, I was watching that film Durga a few days, the film Durga that was made, it is a Malayalam film, a very traumatic 2.5 hours of sitting through it. But it kind of tells you what is the trauma that the woman experiences in just the fear of what can happen. Okay, so it's a very powerful, it's a very dark film, but well, that's what the director wanted to do. So to assist the woman to register the complaint, to create that enabling environment is the primary basis of making the act successful. Okay, so when institutions say we don't have any problems of sexual harassment, is that really true? Is what we need to step back and look at. Okay, so yes, we don't have to have dozens and dozens of cases slapped on people, but we must definitely have done enough orientation, done enough of campaign to prevent such assault on the dignity of the woman student, the woman worker, the woman colleague, etc., etc. Okay, and what is the mechanism available for redressal of the complaint? ICC will first, and only if requested by the woman, try to work towards conciliation, right? If somebody looks at, it depends on the nature of sexual harassment. Okay, for example, there are offices where a superior can keep calling the woman in. Okay, she might not even be directly working with him, or she might be directly working. Okay, similarly, a teacher might want, keep showing me your practical files to some particular girl student, right? Once, twice, thrice, acceptable. But if the student is being called forever, then obviously it's not about the practical file. It's about something else, right? And the practical file is just a red herring for aberrant behavior that needs to be reined in. Okay, so then it's possible that the woman complains, and then the committee sits, hears both sides, and then the student or the colleague might be willing for a conciliation. Okay, if somebody is willing for a conciliation with no monetary settlement, it's only then that an inquiry gets to become necessary. Okay, so the process of conciliation is a very important stage of the possibility of avoiding having to go through the inquiry, because ultimately, when these cases come up, it's a very unpleasant situation. And I've seen many of these, been part of inquiring many of these. I mean, I cannot talk because these are, a part of the act also tells you that you cannot talk about this once a report is done. It is to be private. It cannot be public. It cannot go to the media. It cannot become a transparent document. The committee works with the secrecy clause of being fair. And that's why the constitution of the committee is a very important determinant of how successful, creating that environment and becoming an enabler gets to become possible. I hope I'm clear about this. People are understanding me, no issues?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes?
Yeah, understanding. Yeah.
Yes. Then if once there is a complaint, what is the situation? Once there is a complaint, the complainant has to be protected. Okay? I mean, I'm going to kind of be very, very anecdotal because I think when I was a young girl, somebody tried to, molest me, hold my breast, and I was a young girl, a very militant young girl. I just held the bicycle, and the guy ran away. So I took the bicycle up my flat. So a little later, the boy's brother came to ask for the bicycle. I called the cops, and the boy was put overnight in lockup. So in the night, the boy's brother comes to me and says that if anything happens to my brother, we'll see. Okay, so that's the kind of fear. And I'm talking before this act was made. I was obviously not the beneficiary of the making of this act. So when I say I here, I'm just narrating to you an incident. And now don't say that, this teacher came and said, and so I'm going to do it. No, please don't do it. It's a very dangerous world. These are times when you have acid attack. You have to work for your rights in an institutional way. You cannot do it in an individual way. It's just plain luck that we survived all that. Okay, so it's foolhardy to actually kind of take it on your own. You just might be stabbed or shot to death, and that's the end of your story. So the point is to be careful, right? That was far too stupid and very, very naive way of reacting. But the point is that, once you make a complaint, you are vulnerable, right? You're vulnerable from the vulnerable to be targeted. Okay, so in this act, there is a very clear process that is suggested where, the woman or the respondent should be either transferred, that is for an office workplace, because this act was basically made for the workplace, or the woman should be granted leave. Okay, because if I've complained against my superior, obviously, my superior, if I'm around after I made the complaint, can actually be quite nasty and difficult, and can even get me, beaten up, right? And I can even land up in the hospital. We do know that in our country, you have terrible accidents, and you just become an accident case. Okay, so there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear, and this fear then becomes the basis for you're not feeling comfortable to register a complaint, right? So the registering of the complaint itself is something that is something that a woman will think 10 times, because laws work in the social environment, and our social environment is definitely not about, us experiencing equality. The laws are there trying to create an environment of equality, and that's why the report that Veena Mazumdar etc. made writes towards equality, right? Towards equality. We do know that Article 14, 15, when you begin the reading of this act, it talks about Article 14, 15, 21. Look at various constitutional rights. You read them together, you see that we have a whole lot of rights of equality. But for equality to be available to us in social terms, the society has to be ready for it, right? And that's why somebody like an Ambedkar, who drafted the Indian, who was part of making the Indian Constitution, when we adopted the Indian Constitution, Ambedkar said, we have adopted a constitution where our individual rights are guaranteed to us. But we need to wait and see how these individual rights can work in the society in which we live, right? So that's something that was understood at that time. So that continues to be an issue. So the complainant, the fear of the complainant after making the complaint, the securing of the complainant's life, and to make her not feel scared is something that is also part of the act, right? Part of the act. And then, then that 90 days within which the inquiry has to be done. Within 10 days of the completion of the inquiry, the report with the recommendation has to be sent to the employer, district officer for action as per service rules. Okay, so whoever is the sexual harasser, the complaint has been filed against, action has to be taken once the report that is made in 90 days is put forward. That too is clearly given in it, as it were. And hence one sees that it's not that you can sit on it, governments can come, governments can go, and that file can remain forever there. Action will be completely in a state of limbo, right? But you cannot have a state of limbo in this act. You have to take a decision, and you have to, within 10 days, implement that decision after those 90 days. So it's all very time bound. It's all not only time bound, it also kind of gives you the right to, right to make yourself heard and to get your justice, right? The mechanism is there, but how well that mechanism works, it also, of course, depends on how well people know their laws, right? How well people are able to get justice, okay? So these are two important constitutive elements that also then decide how much of, how much this really works. There are also some safeguards for the working of this act. In the Vishaka guidelines, you just heard the women's point of view. Okay, and the man had to prove that he was innocent, right? But in the new 2013 Act, and this is something about which a lot of women's organizations are a little worried about. Why? Because if the ICC, the local committee, concludes that there is a malicious intent on the part of the complainant, it can recommend action against her, right? Now, this clause came in because there were a lot of men who have taken up this question of anti-dowry law and saying that with the anti-dowry law, a lot of women have slapped false cases of dowry, right? When there's problems in the marriage and when a woman breaks the marriage, the lawyers tell them to use various clauses, and therefore this anti-dowry law it is stated that it is much abused. Okay, and so safeguarding men from women who are overarchingly so powerful in terms of their rights, therefore necessitated this kind of a safeguard where false slapping of cases would also result in a woman inviting trouble, losing her job, facing action, etc., as it were. Fair enough. But I would also say that very few women actually dare to take on to slap a case of sexual harassment or to make a charge of, make a charge of dowry, make it dowry case when she's breaking up her marriage. But there would be one or two odd cases, but the odd does not make it a pattern. But that then becomes a reason for this kind of a safeguard that has now become part of the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act, Gazette Notification 2013. Of course, I've not gone into a whole lot of nitty-gritty details about compensation, etc., as it were. Now that is the act for you in toto, in a short summary that I've provided to you. But what is it that I always, talk about with my students, with places where I engage on campaigning about gender sensitivity and awareness. And that is that, we have to create a conducive environment of work and life. And that's where I want to make a couple of comments. When we go to educational institutions, when we join as workforce, when we are trainers, teachers, and citizens, all this is part of our making of our society, right? And society, the making of society, if you think of Hammurabi's laws, in that stele that goes back to ancient Iraq, what were laws about? Laws basically are about stabilizing society, creating norms of acceptance, making people follow, create a pattern whereby there is social consent and not dissent, and lack of order, right? So laws are about orderliness in society, and orderliness is part of what nations, citizenship, and making for a stable environment are importantly connected with. And therefore, some of the main important things that you can kind of think about is respect women's colleagues' private space. How they dress, how they look is none of your business, right? I mean, for example, people ask me, why don't you tie your hair? So I ask them, why don't you cut your hair? Why don't you shave your head, right? That's none of your business. But then people don't understand this. In India, the moment you look at somebody, oh, you put on so much of weight, hi, sexy, right? I mean, men and women use it, women use it with women. Today, women can use it with women because you are living in an environment where, many of these things that we fought against as young women have now become common sense. You're not scared of it anymore, right? But earlier, when somebody said hot, sexy, and whistled, you felt insecure to, walk that distance between your home and the railway station, right? When you had to take a train to go to your school, okay? But now, sexy or hot or everything has become common parlance, okay? A 13, 14-year-old girl being called hot and sexy is not exactly a comfortable feeling, unless, of course, it's a boyfriend that she's comfortable with, okay? So it's otherwise, a cuss word. And why should somebody be, looking at somebody as eye candy, sexy for what? There's a certain meaning there, right? So it's how you dress, what you wear. She's a tomboy. Who are you to decide whether she's a tomboy, right? Who are you to say, oh, she's very girly? Okay, none of your business, right? You interact with each other as individuals in a modern way without making those comments. And you can make those comments when somebody is willing to let you get into your little world, right? That window when it's open to you, right? When both parties are willing, it's another situation. But otherwise, it is an assault on my right, on my dignity, right? That we have to understand. Secondly, right, in thought, word, and deed, treat women, colleagues, classmates as your equal. oh, she's got better marks. No, she, sir likes her, right? And then there's this whisper campaign that, sir likes her, therefore she gets better marks. She's not a good brain, right? This is a way of dissing women. This is a way you kind of, in a classroom, make it less than equal for your, girl classmates. And that is a very terrible situation, because what one does is you're finishing the possibility of that girl child actually realizing her potential to probably become another accomplished scholar as any other boy in our class could have. Okay, so this is a challenge of constantly saying that, oh, girl child, you get a better day. So treat your classmates and your sexual harassment is a penal offense, and you don't want to be its subject or object. Okay, you need to understand this, that sexual harassment is not acceptable. Right? Are wo chingdi, oh kili, right? That whistle. Okay. When you travel in buses in Kerala, that gaze is so much of violence. Right? As a young girl, I can never forget it. So if it was gaze in Kerala, it was touch in Delhi. Right? Such toxic masculinity. Why can't we just be normal? Right? You like somebody, go ahead and say, I like you. But if that somebody says, I don't like you, back off. Okay? Both these should be acceptable and it should be agreeable. And that is a better work environment, study environment where girls and boys can feel comfortable with each other. Okay, and predators do not belong, only belong in the wild, not in a university, not in an office. Okay, there are women know that gaze and they avoid these men. Oh, that guy is coming, let's avoid. Okay, so we won't go to the canteen, let's go to the library. We'll come out, let him come out of the canteen, then we'll go to the canteen. Okay, so why should you be the feared person, that predator, right? And we do know that in the animal world, you caught the female, right? Whereas, and there's no rape there. The animal, by and large, in the animal world, that's why you see strutting like a peacock. The peahen is pretty much ugly, right? Look at all the animal kingdom. I mean, they're very beautiful, resplendent, trying to look lovely. Exactly the opposite of what patriarchy has done to women and their lives. The painted, dented comment of Pranab Mukherjee's son getting into trouble many years ago. Okay, so this entire thing of painted women. Okay, so when the Women's Bill was brought in the parliament in the 1950s, when the women leaders were talking about rights for women in the parliament, 1950s, not now. These gentlemen, politicians, legislative members in the parliament at that time said, these are, bob cut, lipstick wearing, handbag carrying women. They're not part of our society, right? So that's how they were looked at in the 1950s. Right, from then to now is a very big distance that we have traveled in terms of our rights. And these rights are not something that we are going to be giving up. We're only going to ask for more rights towards equality, as was brought into being in the 1970s. Right. Yet another very important point is be aware that punishable harassment can lie in unwelcome gaze, not just verbal or physical overtures. Right, as I told you in the beginning, okay, you can just, you're using a bad word, right? I mean, calling somebody a bitch, right? Slut, right? You might think that bitch and slut is common parlance. That's not acceptable to me. It is not acceptable to me. It is harassment as far as I'm concerned. Be aware of this. Focus on your work, and that means creating a healthy workplace where women too can focus on their work, on their studies, and not worry about their security and dignity, right? So that is why, a very important early women studies theorist, Sheila Rowbotham, Her book's title is Dignity and Daily Bread, right? Dignity and Daily Bread are very good coming together, I would say. And therefore, lastly, I'd say let's all work together towards making that change. Right? Everybody, of course, says be the change you want to see the world to look like as Gandhiji. But Gandhiji never said anything like that. He said something on those lines, right? We but mirror the world, right? Look within, right? Look within. In Kerala, you have the tradition of Vishu, and you keep a mirror and you look at yourself, right? I mean, in some kind of ritual, work. I mean, that's seeing yourself in the mirror. You keep seeing yourself, and you do what you don't want another person to do to you. I mean, don't do anything that you don't want others to do to you, right? You follow that principle in your everyday life, and possibly, and this is a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, that we but mirror the world, right? That quote, you can just read it. I don't want to kind of read the quote. It's there, that I just jotted it down, extracted it, and therefore celebrating difference and at the same time respecting each other makes for a conducive environment for learning and working, right? And that's best, that augurs best for us individually and collectively, right? Individually and collectively. And when I say difference, right, towards women's equality, all of us, don't believe in feminism that I want to be like a man, be like a man. I want to be a woman, right? I can be different but equal, right? I can be different but equal. So there are many kinds of feminism. You make a choice of what kind of woman you want to be. There is no single neat format in which you structure your sensibility of equality. But equality you must get, and that equality is what the Act is trying to bring into being, or possibly create the basis for. And you work with the Act, you work with prevention, you work with yourselves, and you will see that you will do very well in life, because ultimately from being a student to becoming a worker to becoming a boss, that shift that we make in our lives is part of, will be a better one if we imbibe these attitudes, these normative practices, and that makes us a wonderful colleague, not just in college, but also in terms of work life, as also in terms of life partners, right? And therefore, we will have a more equal family, right? In terms of familial relations. And that's what ultimately, is also important for us to work towards, right? Thank you very much. I hope you understood me, and I did not kind of, do a very Rajdhani kind of fast discussion of things. And I'm willing to now also, if you want you have queries, questions, I am willing to engage. Thanks, Minnie. Thanks, Principal. Thanks, the IQAC and Gender Equity team. And to the dear students who have patiently sat for about an hour hearing me while I was putting slides and talking about things as if, this is what it is. Well, this is not what it is, but this is what it should be. And let's work towards what is a better world for every one of us, a fair world. And that dream, that tryst with destiny that we as a nation made in the direction of constitutionally guaranteed equality as citizens in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, ma'am. It was so informative, and thank you, ma'am, for spending your valuable time with us today. So I request is there for anyone to please speak out a few words to provide a feedback on the session. Is there anyone?
Yes.
Okay,
Hello?
you may. Yes, you're audible.
Okay, my name is Anita from CSEA. I'm really glad to hear a talk from an brilliant person, resource person, SHOBHANA ma'am. And thank you so much for providing a speech related to gender equity. And we were able to understand about the importance of gender equity and gender equity cell, which is active in our college nowadays. And we were able to understand about the sexual harassment that is occurring around the world and the way by which we have to overcome. Because in today's world, it is very important for every person to overcome the situations and to move on. And thank you so much for finding a time for us for this talk. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Anita. And once again, thank you, ma'am. For all the students, you are requested to look up to the chat section where a feedback form link will be shared. So everyone has to fill it up in order to get your activity points along with the e-certificates. As stated by Dalai Lama, the roots of all goodness lies in the soil of appreciation. So winding up with the session, I would welcome our Assistant Professor of EC Department and the Joint Convener of Gender Equity Cell, Mr. Basil K. Jimoon, to deliver word of thanks. Please, sir.
Thank you for the invite. Good afternoon to one and all. It gives me immense pleasure to deliver the word of thanks for this event to all dignitaries assembled here. I would like to thank our chairman of governing body Fisat, Mr. Shimit Pia sir, who despite his busy schedule has found time to grace this function and inaugurate the cell. A very special thanks to our keynote speaker for the event, Dr. SHOBHANA WARRIER, Associate Professor in the Department of History at KAMALA NEHRU College, University of Delhi, for accepting our invitation and delivering a talk on the topic Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act 2013. I'm sure students and staff have benefited from her talk. Also, we wish to keep in touch with you, ma'am, for the future events of our gender equity cell. I would like to thank our beloved principal of Fisat, Dr. Manoj George sir, who honored this function with his inspirational words. I would like to thank our vice principal, Dr. C. Sheila Miss, who is a constant support and motivation for conducting this event. I would like to thank Dr. Mini PR, Dean Academic Fisat, for giving us encouragement and initiation to conduct this event. My heartfelt thanks to all the heads of various departments, members of Gender Equity Cell, and all the faculty colleagues who have joined us for their valuable guidance and encouragement in all our efforts. I extend my heartfelt thanks to one and all who have helped us conduct this function and make this function a grand success. I thank all the 400 plus students who have joined us in this meeting for their cooperation in making this event a resounding success. Once again, I thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much. Participants for the event, students who have participated in this event, please see the chat section where the feedback link is being shared. And please give your full name and the details which are asked in the feedback link so that we can issue e-certificate for you, which will carry activity points.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Finally, we have come to the end of this beautiful event. With God's grace and support from coordinators, participants, and faculty members, we could conduct it smoothly through the online platform. So now I request all to rise up for the national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Once again, thank you all for your wholehearted support. And this is Rose Tombal signing off.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, madam. Thank you, all participants.
Bye-bye, everyone.